So we're going to be starting a topic in math called integers. And these sounds really fancy, except it's numbers that you've actually probably been working with for a very, very long time. So for example, I want you to think about a temperature outside on a really hot day. So for example, temperature outside on a really hot day might be, oh, it's not working, might be about 30 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Celsius. That would be really hot outside. Might be in the middle of August, you're at 32 degrees Celsius. A cool day, so I want you to picture, a day in maybe in April. It's not hot, but it's not super cold either, so it's cool. Might be 12 degrees Celsius. So you can go outside, you might need a light jacket, but it's not too bad. Now, think about a really cold, snowy day. So think about a day in January or February when you're outside and it's freezing and you got your snow pants on. It could be -9. It could be even lower than that. It has to be, for it to be snowing, it has to be below 0. So those are some examples of temperatures, and those are some examples of integers. So an example of a temperature on a hot sunny day is 32 degrees Celsius. Cool spring day, 12 degrees Celsius. On a cold, snowy day, maybe -9 degrees Celsius. How would we say 10 degrees below 0? We might say -10 degrees Celsius. Which one do you think is colder? 15 degrees below 0 or 10 degrees below 0? Now, definitely 15 degrees below 0 is colder, which is kind of interesting. It's an interesting thing about integers, that the bigger the number part gets, the colder, right? The smaller the number actually is, because it's further and further away from 0. So if we were to put these temperatures in order from the coldest to the hottest, we'd actually start with -8 as the coldest temperature, and then -2, and then 0. Then we would go 4 and 12. I'm going to run out of space. And 17. I'm out of space now, and 32 would be our largest one. So using that as a guide, let's look at this thing called integers. So integers are numbers in the sequence from the negative numbers all the way to the positive numbers. They're basically just positive and negative whole numbers and 0. So integers would be shown on a number line. So for example, these ones on the left-hand side are called the negative integers. These ones on the right-hand side are called the positive integers. And the one in the middle is 0, and it is neutral. So 0 is neither positive nor negative. Another thing for you to know about integers is every integer has an opposite. So for example, the opposite of 4 is -4. The opposite of 0 is 0. So 0 is kind of the exception to that rule, although you can say the opposite of 0 is 0. The opposite of 8 would be -8. I want you to think about some real life examples of integers. So think about in your life, where have you ever seen positive and negative things? So we've already looked at temperature. Maybe have you thought about owing people money, right? So that's like you're being negative. That's negative money if you owe someone money. Anybody a golfer? In golf, you can have scores that are under or over par. So there's all kinds of different things with integers. Different measurements, below and above sea level, for example, those are integers. So let's look at these following real life type examples. So if you owe the bank $50, what is that? That means you are at -$50. If you get an allowance of 15, that means you're at +$15. If you live in a city 15 meters below sea level, you're at -15 meters. If you're 4 under par, you're at -4. So let's look at some of the language that we've already been introduced to. So whole numbers and their corresponding negative numbers are called opposites. Again, 5 and -5. Negative integers are less than 0, and positive integers are more than 0. So let's look at some examples, make sure that you understand what you've learned about in terms of an introduction to integers. So what's the opposite of 3? The opposite of 3 is negative 3. What's the opposite of negative 5? The opposite of negative 5 is positive 5. Notice that I didn't write a plus sign. So usually if things are positive, we don't need to write a sign. In math, a number, for example 10, it's just understood that that means positive 10. Negative, you have to put the sign. So for it to say negative 10, you need to have the negative sign in front of it. So let's put these in order from the smallest to the biggest. So again, smallest is the furthest away from 0. So in this case, negative 11, that is the smallest. Negative 8 is the second smallest. Then negative 3, then 0, then 4, then 6. So again, be really careful. With integers, the bigger the actual number part gets, the further away from 0 it is, which means it's the smallest. So for example, which one's bigger, negative 5 or negative 11? Negative 5 is bigger because it is closer to 0.